Congressman, I apologize with my rant in the last segment, but thanks for being patient.
Hey, Mike, no problem. I like the song, great choice. and I told your producer, I said, if Mike wants me to talk about inflation and overspending in Congress, I'm happy to talk about that too, whatever Mike wants.
But I think they go together with what I wanted to ask you about and what we were originally scheduled to talk about, and that is the executive orders by the president and how they're being received in D.C., and how it's being perceived by many in Washington, because it seems like that's where many people like to see the immediate changes. But there's a lot of people in Washington, there's a lot of pushback.
There is a lot of pushback outside of Congress, outside of the Republican conference in Congress. And so a way to think about it is the bureaucrats are pushing back. Some of the K Street lobbyists are pushing back. Certainly the other side of media is pushing back. But within Congress, we're looking for things that he's doing, and we're actually introducing legislation to codify what he's doing, because much of what he's doing is, some of it is what we actually introduced, but we could never get passed through the Senate under Schumer or get to the president's desk under Biden. But I mean, I'm pleased with what he's doing. And by the way, I think he's doing everything he said he was going to do. He said he was going to do this. Let's say it's DEI. He says he's going to do this on DEI. He said he's going to do it with the Remain in Mexico policy. He's keeping his promises. And I think there's a lot of Americans that are used to a politician trying to keep every promise that they made.
Yeah, and as it pertains to the economy, the attempt they were making with an executive order that they've rescinded that would freeze spending in a lot of discretionary places until they could kind of figure out where some waste was happening. But what I think that's done is, although they rescinded it because maybe it can't be done by executive order, is it shining a light on what you're doing in Washington now and the way that Congress is spending money in earmarks? Are they going to be more leery in adding in what we would call foolish spending? Are they going to pay more attention to that, knowing the country's watching?
Well, you can't get enough transparency for me with Washington, D.C. spending. And I'm going to just be the first to tell you, many of my own Republican colleagues, they support earmarks, right? So they want to do earmarks, and that's antithetical to kind of the Republican Party platform. But that's the reality. There is, for the first time, I actually heard some of my friends who serve on the Appropriations Committee that have been there a long time, and I mean a long time, Mike. Some of them have actually said, "Well, maybe we need to reduce some spending," and that's news. But I'll just tell you. What the president's trying to do, and he's talked about in his inauguration, is actually you have to reduce federal spending in order to reduce inflation. And I keep telling him with these reconciliation bills, we have to bend the spending curve down. Until you bend the spending curve down, you're never going to actually be able to slow your structural deficit or your growth in your national debt. And there actually is a surprising number of people outside of my own echo chamber in D.C. now that are actually coming around to that idea.
When we talk about spending, even if we can all, and this is in my opinion, the Republican-Democrat conversation is how much should the federal government be involved in people's lives. But we're not even talking about entitlement programs. We're talking about condoms in Gaza, birth control in Afghanistan. We're talking about a knockoff of Sesame Street in Iraq to the tune of $10 million or $20 million. These seem like no-brainers that they should be eliminated because of the $36 trillion in debt. Is that finally going to grow legs in Washington because the people are watching the nonsense that some of the spending is?
I hope so, Mike. I hope so. And I just want to comment briefly on that. The reason that you have those crazy programs in there is they get in there, and then Congress passes what's called a continuing resolution. So instead of passing an actual budget, they keep all the programs, they keep all the spending going on. And they've done that 35 times in the last 10 years instead of passing 12 budget bills, which is required by law, the Budget Control and Impound Act of 1974. Congress itself doesn't follow the law. And so now I will just tell you, even some of my friends who we disagree on a lot of things within the conference, we actually agree a lot, but they are now coming around saying, we have got to stop this. We have got to get this done. But I'm going to tell you right now, Mike, in March, that's when the last CR comes due again. Don't be surprised if you see them try to do a continuing resolution again, which would continue those stupid programs and wasteful programs. I will continue to be against that and demand that we do the budget bills so the public can see transparently. If you don't do the budget bills, you don't see those programs. You don't hear about those programs. They just continue on without review.
And see, that's part of the issue. One of the organizations we talked about with that list of things that I had earlier was USAID. And that organization that had, been working all over the world, the world they worked in when the Iraq War began in 2003 is a different place than it was 10 years later, and it's a different place than it is now. So if you have these CRs, are you saying that the programs that may have been viable 10 years ago just continue because the CR continues?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that whatever the last level of budget is, that's where you continue. And the programs continue. They're not reviewed. You keep spending money. I mean, you mentioned a few of the bad ones. I introduced a couple of years ago, my staff and I went through it. We found 520 programs that should be eliminated or reduced. And I introduced 523 bills to do that. Single line item bills, one bill at a time. And I couldn't get anybody in the Appropriations Committee or in leadership to even look at it. This is our problem, and it exacerbates the problem of the growing deficit, which, by the way, 10 years ago might have been $1 trillion a year. Now it's $2.5 trillion a year is the deficit. That means your national debt's growing. So in 10 years, you're going to add $25 trillion to the 37 you have now, plus an additional exacerbation because that will cause inflation. That means the interest rates will go up because the market's going to discipline it. Mm-hmm. The market's going to try to impose discipline on federal spending. That means interest rates will go up. It'll have a devastating impact to the economy, and that means you'll actually be sitting and looking at somewhere north of $70 trillion in national debt within 10 years unless we do something tomorrow.
Yeah, that's just, those numbers are just so astronomical and scary. To the average person, you can't even wrap your arms around it. The number of $1 trillion, never mind 70 trillion. Last question is, last time we spoke on the air, you were exploring the possibility of running for governor here in the state of Arizona. But then the state meeting happened to the Republican Party. Did you make your announcement official? Are you officially running for the governor's office in Arizona?
Yeah, Mike, I did. We decided that was a propitious place to announce. You had a couple thousand Republicans there, all essentially elected precinct committee men and women, so they're really activists, and it was time for me to announce. And so I did announce last Saturday that I'm running for governor in 2026.
Well, I wish you well, and I appreciate you being patient with my forgetfulness today and listening to my rant. And I hope to talk to you again soon. I appreciate the time and the insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. Keep up the good work.
All right. That is Congressman Andy Biggs that had to sit through 2 segments of my show, so we owe him some combat pay.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.